Bertemu kembali dalam Niaga AWANI, kita memberikan tumpuan juga kepada diskusi yang biasanya dan juga lazimnya kita bawakan berkaitan dengan pasaran dan juga ekonomi makro. Kita mulakan untuk jam ini bersama dengan pakar kita, where everything old eventually becomes new again. On the fashion side, the 1970s has a wide array of retro offerings, tie-dye, bell-bottom jeans and crochet tops, and also rattan and velvet furniture. But if you ask economists, the defining influence in the 1970s, stagflation, would be best left in the past. Unfortunately, this term, which is often referred to as a perfect storm, has been popping up more and more lately as inflation continues to soar and also the economy shows some signs of stalling. So are those dark clouds on the horizon, or are we getting ahead of ourselves? That's what we're going to talk about this morning with Shan Saeed, Juwai IQI Chief Economist, with us, joining us this morning. Shan, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Shan, first of all, it's stagflation, recession, equity markets going down, geopolitical risk, and also inflation headlines all around the world. You made a statement in your newsletter, November 2020, stagflation ahead of advanced economies and 1970 is back. And also we look at the President World Bank, David Malpass, on June 8th, 2022, made similar comments. I quote on Washington Post, World Bank's fears a 1970 rerun of global stagflation. This is a big call, Shan, a big call in the market. Where do we go from here?
Thank you, Najib. Yes, when we shared in a newsletter in November 2020, nobody believed us. And people thought that Shan Saeed has gone bonkers. But after 20 months, the mainstream media has picked up the thing. 1970s back, the 1970s style used to be the famous one. Najib, at this point of time, the hope for economic recovery looks quite fragile, and it's quite an arduous task at this point of time. Many economies are facing macroeconomic stability, which has become a huge variable post-COVID situation. So in my opinion, economies will continue to struggle. This stagflation will be different from 1970 because we had COVID, we have geopolitical risk, we have food shortages. I still remember last October issue of Economist magazine, the cover page talks about shortages coming in the global economy. So those things are coming back. So at Juwai IQI, we expect global economy to remain under a lot of pressure, and it will only remain in the recovery mode after 2025. But I must say this, we have also made some wrong calls. I'm very open in admitting it is not like whatever Juwai IQI say is cast in stone. We have also made wrong calls, and I'm very open in saying that.
Shan, investors globally, especially in USA or Europe or UK, are thinking recession will solve inflation problem. Do you agree with this view, as inflation is over 8% on the average in these regions? Governor Bank of England has said 9% inflation by December end in UK.
Again, Harith, it's a myth that recession is going to kill inflation. What happens is once recession, it comes into the economy and inflation is high, the central banks tend to go back to QE. And once you have QE, again, the currency stays on the depreciating mode. So when currency goes into depreciating mode, it brings inflation again. So I think it's quite a challenge that investors are misreading the markets and they don't really understand what is happening. And they think that 1970 era will be over. I think it will be a long haul. It will be quite challenging for the next 2 to 3 years. So the myth that recession is going to kill inflation, I think I don't agree with that.
Let's say bring it down from global to Malaysia. In the last 1 week or so, few people made comments that Malaysia is heading for recession. Is it true in reality? What's your view, taking into your account your global macroeconomic expertise?
The simple answer is no, Malaysia is not going into recession. The technical definition of recession is when you have negative GDP for 2 consecutive quarters. That is recession. That is the bookish definition. That is the technical definition. The pragmatic side is that recession is a consumer cycle. When consumers don't spend, the businesses don't invest, the economy shrinks. is totally the opposite right now from September last year. The economy has opened up, consumer spending remains very strong, investment is back. One of the biggest companies in US, Intel, made a huge investment announcement last December, $7.5 billion. So when a company of size of Intel with a market cap $150 billion come into Malaysia, that is a very positive signal to many other companies that Malaysia's economic confidence remain high. Companies believe that Malaysia is on the growth path, and right now we have done a small survey. Most of the consumer sentiments remain strong, and we believe the macroeconomic stability is on the rise, and this will continue to maintain keep Malaysia on the global investors' radar. So to say that Malaysia is going into recession, I don't believe that.
And Shan, of course, so I can make an inference from your comment that you agree with our finance minister and also Bank Negara, narrative that Malaysia is not going into recession. Maybe what's the GDP outlook for Juwai IQI at least for 2022, Shan?
Najib, at the start of the year, we said Malaysia's GDP will be trading between 4 and 5%, and we continue to maintain that stance. It is based on the premise that manufacturing will remain high. We said that trade numbers for this year will be trading between 1.3 and 1.5 trillion dollars. Commodity prices will stay high, domestic demand will be strong, and this has led to our premise that Malaysia's GDP will be 4 and 5%, and we continue to believe the economy will stay buoyant from here onwards.
Shan, when we said about stagflation, how do investors protect their wealth in these turbulent times with stagflation happening globally? What does history teach us, and what happened in 1970s era?
Very interesting question. In 1970 era, most of those sophisticated and smart investors, they were going into tangible assets. What is tangible assets? They were going into real estate. They were going into gold, silver, arts, farmland. And these asset classes were on the global investors' radar in 1970. So what happens when you have stagflation, you have rising inflation and low growth? Most of those sophisticated investors, they like to go into real asset. I can tell you, Bill Gates has invested $786 million just in farmland in 18 states in US. In 1970s, arts gave a dividend of a rate of 30 to 40% in these turbulent times. Gold went up 2,300% just as a span of 10 years. So I think in order to protect your wealth, in order to preserve your wealth, sophisticated and smart investors should understand history, go back to 1970, see what happened in 1970, and they should remain on top of the market.
All right, Shan, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really appreciate of your insights and all that. Kita akan sudah pasti akan mengumpulkan dan juga merangkumkan kesemua pandangan ini di laman web kami astro.com. Baik, kita akan berhenti seketika. Kita akan kembali selepas ini.